Thank you, Professor Hayes, for letting me do this interview with you. It counts 10% of my grade in Dr. Herman's American History class.
Mark Herman, Fort Myers campus? Yeah, I know him. We've worked together before.
And I really appreciate it. The assignment is to choose one of our professors and ask them a bunch of questions about history. Not sure why.
Probably hoping you will see that history is alive and meaningful, not just a dead subject confined to a classroom.
Oh, okay. Well, here's the first question. What made you become interested in your academic discipline?
Academic discipline? That's an awkward term, don't you think? Stuffy, way too formal. But, well, the truth, I suppose, is that I was not a nerd, not a student at an ivory tower university, divorced from the real world, not in any way attracted to those professors, and we've all seen them, who like to strut and look down over their noses while lecturing. The sage on the stage, we used to call it. No, oddly enough, my path to academia was more like through streets and back alleys, so to speak, not classrooms. I was in my early 30s, and after a few boring coat and tie jobs, I dropped out, quote unquote, as we used to say, made the mandatory flower child pilgrimage to California for a couple of years, and was basically living hand to mouth on the edge of society with a boisterous gang of writers, musicians, unemployed poets and intellectuals, cultural rebels and assorted creatives, etc., etc. It was only natural, I suppose, that we would read and identify with the left bank artist and expats who scribbled on napkins at those Parisian sidewalk cafes in the 1920s. We were a motley bunch, high on life, social pariahs who, if there had been a yearbook, we surely would have been voted most unlikely to succeed. But it was an exciting, immensely creative life we were living, even if productive in ways more felt than seen. I mention this because 15 to 20 years after majoring in psychology, I was having oodles of guilty fun saying yes to life, Nietzsche's term, by the way, saying yes to life by doing nothing. Well, I was writing sloppy prose and hanging nights at outdoor beach bars with rowdy friends for animated discussions, prowling the public library for books on religion, philosophy, literature, the arts, whatever. Not because I was pursuing those areas as subjects or thought of them as an academic discipline, but because those books were alive. They spoke to me. All around me, culture was in chaos, centuries-old rock-solid traditions crumbling beneath my feet, and I was fascinated, welcomed change, but also wanted to understand. I remember that I especially devoured books on modern art and cultural theory. And about this time, I fell in love with a 24-year-old adjunct instructor at a 2-year college in St. Pete, Florida. And I learned that in academic catalogs, these same 4 subjects, religion, philosophy, literature, and the arts, are formally called humanities. I didn't know that before. I had heard the word humanities, of course, but it was always too slippery for me to pin down exactly. Schools lump those 4 subjects together and often approach them chronologically in the context of cultural history. So you study civilizations like Greece, Rome, Middle Ages, Renaissance, etc. Why? Well, essentially, those areas of inquiry are repositories of human values. Those are the places where people try to figure out what life is all about. Exactly what I had been doing all those years, reading and, quote, doing nothing, end quote. I still have trouble thinking of religion, philosophy, literature, and the art as impersonal subjects. They are more like family, sometimes dysfunctional to be sure, but dynamically intertwined. So, to answer your question more specifically, my girlfriend, the humanities teacher, briefly to become my fiancée, motivated me by example to enroll in grad school. I was in my 40s by then and painfully shy. I had no assurance that I could ever comfortably stand up in front of a class and actually talk, much less field questions from students. I was so scared that my hair turned gray the night before my first lecture at a university up in Michigan. As a side note, my girlfriend left teaching because colleges at that time were only hiring adjuncts, part-time instructors, without benefits. Not a good career choice back then, college teaching. And she left me, she said, because I was foolish enough to gamble my future on a sinking ship. How would I ever be able to support her and a family? The bottom line, I guess, if you're looking for a soundbite, is that for 20 years after college, I read books, lots of books. I carried a book with me wherever I went, a bar, a restaurant, the beach. And I got a job as a night watchman so I could be alone and read as much as I wanted to. I didn't read for college credit. I read, like I said, because books were alive. They spoke to me. I didn't get into the humanities. They got into me.
What do you like most about working at Florida Southwestern State College?
I'm retired now and only teach part-time online, which has allowed me to travel and indulge a new love, photography. In the 15 years since I left full-time teaching at the Collier campus, I've made 8, 9, maybe 10, I've lost track of the number, cross-country, coast-to-coast road trips. Many summers in Yellowstone, I have photographed wolves just as the sun was peeking over the rim of Lamar Valley, sat down mid-morning on a stump in neighboring Hayden Valley to eat lunch and log into my humanities class, and then headed back toward Mount Washburn to find some grizzlies before they took a siesta. Gotta love it when you can hold office hours in Yellowstone National Park. My first foray into the classroom after grad school at USF was at Ferris State University in Big Rapids, Michigan, a rinky-dink party school and not known for academic excellence, but beggars can't be choosy, as mine was a full-time position with benefits. Students would stagger in for an 8 a.m. class bragging about how hungover they were. One kid, believe it or not, confessed to me that he had never read a book. So it is hardly an understatement to say that when I arrived in Naples, I felt like I had died and gone to heaven. Students here at FSW are wonderful. Yes, like everyone else, they bitch about the relevance of the humanities, but they are respectful, they are motivated, they study, they work hard. Watching eyes light up when an insight goes off like a light bulb in their head is a reward like no other. Besides the students, what do I like most? Well, it's hard to beat the fact that I get paid for encountering all the best artistic creations and intellectual achievements since the beginning of time. And they even give me free textbooks. It also doesn't hurt that when teaching full-time, I got something like 17 weeks off each year. Unpaid, to be sure, but I would thin out my paychecks and spread them over 12 months to make do. Gotta love a job that gives a former beach bum like myself that much free time.
What was one of the most important factors that contributed to your success as a college student?
My college experience was unique. I was in the second batch of students to arrive at a brand new, top-notch liberal arts school in St. Petersburg, Florida. The class before me, who were the founding freshmen, were now sophomores, but there were not yet any juniors or seniors, which means we two classes were special. We got to grow the college from scratch by selecting school colors and logos, starting the school newspaper, voting against Greek letter organizations, forming the first athletic teams, and generally establishing school traditions that morphed into legends reverently passed down through the years. But that's not all. Florida Presbyterian College, now called Eckerd College, was on the cutting edge of education in terms of curriculum, with an interdisciplinary great books approach and teaching methodology, small discussion-based seminars. One of their innovations was a midwinter independent study semester, no formal classes, where students during the month of January designed and pursued their own projects individually with a professor of their choosing. The net result was that we bonded with the school, with our professors, and with each other in a way that continues to this day. We were family, and a small number of students, barely 150 total students my first year, that's freshmen and sophomores combined, guaranteed that each of us knew everyone else, at least by sight, and usually by name. Imagine a campus where no one was anonymous. Most important factor, you ask? I suppose it was just that, the strong relationships we developed with our professors. They ate lunch with us in the cafeteria. Some invited us into their homes for family holidays. All the professors, math, science, social sciences, participated as lecturers and discussion leaders in a common core program called Western Civilization. And if they were unfamiliar with some of the material because it was outside their specialty, they read the material for the first time and sat down and learned right alongside of us. I always laugh at how the athletic director, Billy O'Warman, who later became the second president of the college, would barge into my dorm room every Saturday morning, way too early, if he asked me, and drag me out of bed to play tennis. That's critical, in my opinion, finding a professor who not only loves to teach, but can also be a role model and a mentor and a friend. And if such a relationship lasts a lifetime, as many did, so much the better. I was only 17 when I left home and dropped my bags on an empty bunk in a small dorm room on campus. Immature and socially inept, but thanks to a new and exciting and nurturing college environment, I survived.
What historical area of study do you specialize in? Or, if you are not a history instructor, what is your preferred area of history?
As I mentioned earlier, I enjoyed a living relationship through arts and ideas long before I returned to school to study them as formal subjects. None of us were students, and most of us were underemployed, but my friends and I could sense the ferment all around us of, in Bob Dylan's raspy worlds, a world busy being born. An evolving cultural paradigm, actually two, modernism and postmodernism, sprinkled with arts and ideas that got up in your face and demanded understanding, was emerging right before my eyes. What could match that for excitement? So I can say that what some call the age of anxiety or the age of uncertainty, late 1800s and up well into the 1900s, speaks eloquently to me. I was forged in the same crucible of experience that spawned new ways of looking at the world. God is dead and we have killed him, said Nietzsche. That startling observation by itself pretty much demands that we pay attention to what's going on. Something was clearly happening all around us. Traditional beliefs and ways of living were being challenged, and culture was giving birth to something new and exciting. I suppose I always like to stay close to turmoil with one eye on the horizon. As an era of study, then, the 20th century is a friend I can't bring myself to abandon. We have aged well together into this new 21st century.
If you had to choose the most important reason for the study of history inside and outside of a college setting, what would it be?
The most important reason, you ask, for studying history, or in my case, the humanities? The goal in my courses, at least back when I taught in ground classes, is for students not so much to study humanities as to experience the humanities. That cultural ground of being that we lump together on the rubric of liberal arts/humanities will really only nourish those who actively participate with it. Merely encountering arts and ideas from the outside, reading the Cliff Notes summary of a novel, for example, won't mean a thing. You have to submerge yourself in a work of art. Let it wash over you, soak down inside of you. That's why my students work in groups. First, they read and absorb the material on their own, then share their insights, teach each other. In a nutshell, what we in a humanities classroom seek to accomplish is to yoke a mind with a text. Now, by text has been a painting, a sculpture, a symphony, a poem, etc. And in that confrontation of a properly seated imagination with a carefully chosen text, something incredible is always on the verge of happening. A mind stretches, and imagination grows, consciousness expands, humanity blossoms. Participating in the humanities, when all is said and done, final thought here, affords students the opportunity to get inside the thoughts and feelings of others, to inhabit their experience. You listening, MAGA Republicans? That's called empathy, which is the price of admission to the human community. Sorry about that. Oh, what a crock, huh? I know students sigh and roll their eyes when I toss out this more subtle and less tangible reason for studying humanities. And I get it. Students at this stage of life are preoccupied with vocational goals and boyfriends and girlfriends and all the little mini dramas teenagers are beset with. Personal enrichment is not on their radar. Years later, some of them, when they reach their zenith, and in occasional moments of reflection, when they look back at how much they have changed and matured, may or may not make this larger connection. So forgive my falling back on the kind of pompous gibberish the very same ivory tower academics I castigated earlier like to slip into their syllabi, most never bothering to notice that such a self-actualizing claim is empirically unverifiable. Actually, if on the advice of Samuel Taylor Coleridge you embrace what he called a willing suspension of disbelief, then this highfalutin, blooming consciousness stuff does sound kind of neat, eh? I'm sticking with it.
Thanks again, Professor Hayes. I really need this to bring my average up in Dr. Herman's class.
You're welcome. No problem at all. Hope my answers made some sense.
Dr. Herman is going to compile all the interviews and hand them out to the class so we can grade them.
Grade them?
Well, we will probably just rank order them from best to worst.
So this is like a pop quiz. Your midterm is coming up in my class. Have you heard the phrase quid pro quo?